Welcome to the Asia Tech Podcast. This is Blockchain Asia, and I am your host for the week, Gustavo Liu, with Michelle Wonderland. How are you, Michelle?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. I'm good this Wednesday evening. Nice sunny day today, for the most part.
Actually, it wasn't that sunny. It was actually raining.
Oh, see where I was. It was nice.
I was actually caught in the rain. That was how painful it was.
Oh, no, I had sunshine.
And today we are joined by a good friend of mine, Ross Stokes.
Hey, guys.
How are you?
Fantastic. Actually, I didn't see the rain either, so I'm not sure what he's talking about. So.
Oh
See,
my
it's
God.
just you.
I don't think you guys
Dark
were in
cloud.
Singapore. I think you guys were in another country. Yeah, and I'm super excited right now because, we're going to be talking, revisiting a couple of topics, especially on one that many people are been watching, Singapore being one of the sort of hub for ICOs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting a lot of ICOs in Estonia these days that we're hearing a lot about. Hong Kong has been a popular place. China obviously stopped doing that, but then Singapore is still pretty hot in this space,
Yep.
and I think, Ross, you had a couple of sort of topics that we could discuss in this area, especially because of your background, where you have been so involved in a lot of the ICOs that have been coming from overseas into Singapore.
Yeah, exactly. The Singapore is definitely a hot spot. You look in the media; it's always ranked in the top 1 to 3, 4, 5, depending on whether it's volume or number of ICOs or value of ICOs. So it's very much in people's mind when they're looking at where they're going to conduct an ICO from. It's also considered because Singapore is a great financial hub, like the Switzerland of Asia, so it's comparatively safe, and the regulations are relatively clear here. So people companies coming in here feel comfortable they can work in this environment. So but the interesting thing is, are ICOs dead? You know, we hear in the media a lot that the ICO time is over, and we're slowing down, and it's really interesting looking at that as to what that means for the industry and why ICO started. Do they have a future in startups in particular?
Yeah.
So I'm keen to have a chat about that.
Yeah, it's an area that we've been talking a lot, right?
We've been talking a lot. Yeah, we're so lucky. You know, Singapore is like the place to be, but then it's like the place to be, but there's a lot of this media going around. There's a lot of speculation.
Yeah, you have a look at in ICOs this year alone have raised something like $11 billion for businesses, and a lot of them are startups. And my feel on, if you look at ICOs, where it came from was the intent was crowdsourcing. So it's like Kickstarter.
Yep.
If you go on a Kickstarter, you see this company building this amazing backpack, and you can go and pre-order it and at a discount, and you participate in the support of a product and service. So really what happened was the blockchain industry caught on the crowdsourcing model and then turned it into an ICO.
And actually, I want to support that view, because the crowdsourcing understanding by large, people think that when we talk about crowdsourcing, it's about seeking for funding, but it's not true, right? We predominantly look for three things, which is funding is one of them, but then people look for ideas. They want things validated, right? And the third one, which is essentially mobilized talent. And that is essentially what the ICO space blockchain ICO at large have sort of tried to capture all three of them, because they not only look for funding from the ICO space, they also want to validate a lot of the projects. At the same time, they put it on the web for people to build and open source that.
Exactly. And if you look at the values behind it, community, collaboration, sharing, and the initial ones was about essentially geeks supporting geeks in a software business of how to build a protocol, how do you get some funding to support the developers, and will you come on board? So if you look at those intentions, they've got a bit skewed, particularly last year, where there was a way for speculation and greed to come into it and escalate to ridiculous proportions. Yeah. So then we need to revisit and look at, does that original intent still hold, and how do we reshape things, and will that happen naturally by jurisdictions regulating in certain ways, or will it organically happen where investors become more astute, have a more careful look at the business models, etc. And we'll see good players come in and use ICOs for what they're intended.
And that's an interesting point too, because we see with the popularity and with Singapore as a hub, and you see with the surgence of ICOs, that it's that when you break it back into that model of collective sharing, and having your all of the information be open and but you're right, you think about there's been a good source of greed, a good source of hyperinflated.
But there are some bonuses to that, because with hype and greed and drama comes a lot of publicity.
Yes.
And as we know, all PR is good PR to some degree. And so that's brought a lot of attention into cryptocurrency and blockchain. We're now seeing unprecedented interest from institutions, whether it's family offices, funds, VCs, how they can participate. So we're going to probably see a lot more, I guess, good due diligence, good processes coming into the placement of money. So if you're going to be doing an ICO, then you need to be aware that it's well connected, but also not expecting to just throw a paper in the air and hopefully people are going to throw money after.
Like a couple of years, you could just write a white paper and expect that should be as good as thing. Like people actually do want to see the platform, the underlying technology, and how blockchain is solving for that problem.
And what we're seeing is now a hybrid scene. And I predicted this at the start of the year that equity will come back into play. Yep. And we're now seeing ICOs offering equity as this to create a seed fund to build this what needs to be done, whether it's the technology, community, and then
so do you mean like more like a hybrid raise where you have equity on the company under a particular jurisdiction plus the ICO that is sort of going to be used as a funneling ecosystem?
Well, if you look at to me, the ICO is a great way for growth where normally a Series A and B comes in. And you may get some of it, because what's disappeared a lot is the token seed round. It's really got more difficult. So, and the traditional investors are more comfortable with equity, so they can come in, place that equity, and then when the businesses conduct the ICO instead of a Series A, there's no dilution at that point because you're selling product and services. And that's what an ICO is about, selling product and services. It's not about selling investments, because that's a security token. And
well, I think on that point as well, I was just having a conversation with one of the startups that I brought onto the show, and offline sort of having a chat, and they said that the Series A and beyond in Asia is extremely hard to raise. Yep. And sometimes it does just make sense to just, if there is a application on blockchain for using tokenization for payment systems, for, keeping the economy growing, it just makes sense to raise funds using other type of instruments. Why stick to traditional models when there are more modern solutions?
Yeah. And the big flavor at the moment, particularly in Korea, is this reverse ICO. I think it's a ridiculous word, to be honest. It's not in my mind, a reverse ICO. What it is businesses that are already established, have customers or clients or users, have proven revenue, using an ICO as a way to create growth capital. And so it's really just another, as you say, quite rightly, it's a mechanism that they can raise capital introduced into an existing business. And I'm not sure what the label should be given to it, but I don't think it's a reverse ICO. It's not going backwards. It's just coming into an existing business structure.
I mean, Michelle, you were in California just recently as well. Do you see a lot of that hype of the ICOs, and are people also talking about the blockchain space?
I have to admit, I didn't. But again, the trip wasn't about, funding and raising. But I definitely didn't hear as much of the banter, a lot of the conversation happening and all of that. Obviously it is happening to a certain degree, but it is, from my impression, it was a lot more traditional. And, I see so much growth and so much more talk, so much more action, especially here in Singapore, which is, I think they said, the ICO capital of the world at the moment.
I don't know how true that is. I don't know. What do you think? Is that really that true?
I think it may be just simply because Singapore is physically so small. It's more concentrated, and there's more it's easy to see it. In the US, it's by far the largest ICO market, ironically, even though the SEC have been very clear in terms of how it must be done under security token regulations, the regulations on a security. However, it's still, that's where the money really is, even in the skepticism around and the difficulty and the cost of doing it out of the US, there's still a lot there.
Well, can I just say that
it's spread.
The SEC is a lot more entrepreneurial than people actually think, give them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
The government themselves have a lot, and I always talk about that. The Chinese government are probably one of the biggest VC that you ever see in terms of the actual VC ecosystem. They have a reason and need to fund startups. It's not so much of a choice anymore, but because of the amount of sort of, debt that they are carrying, they have to be invested somehow, one way or the other, and they're already carrying so much debt from other countries, right? And the American government does have a lot of do a lot of initiatives to push. I mean, look at where, a lot of people talk about government sort of putting the brake and stopping startups from implementing new technology. But in the case of blockchain, I mean, where would blockchain be had there not been internet, right? And that, again, who was behind the internet? The government.
Right.
Where would supply chain be if it wasn't because of the government opening up regulations?
Well, I'm not sure about the internet so much, because if you think back when the internet started, what happened in the US in particular, they got up in the arms because suddenly the commerce was happening across borders and they weren't able to control the tax side of it. Yeah. So they were trying to stop the internet at one point because of tax. Then they realized there's no way they could stop it, so they were just going to have to start working with it.
But the way that they worked with it is essentially, I mean, think about the early years when we used to use the modems. You need to have the telcos. You need to have all of that. And that behind a lot of that had a lot of government involvement.
Of course.
Of course.
And you needed regulatory clearance. You needed all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, what was seen in the ICO field, China shut them down, Korea shut them down. But what I believe will happen, Korea, not in their future, will potentially come up with a set of regulations that will allow ICOs to flourish again, or STOs. And who knows what China will do, but I know there's a lot of interest there, and there's and from businesses based out of China and how they build their blockchain businesses. Like you say, there's got to be capital, and ICOs and STOs are ways of making that happen. So I think regulations are good in some regards.
Absolutely. I think that ICO, people tend to meddle ICO with blockchain a lot, and which is roughly what you said. In China, blockchain, it's widely used. It's probably one of the countries that apply blockchain in many aspects, and they're trying to find user cases for application. They are not allowing ICO, but again, that is sort of happening across the border in Hong Kong. Right?
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because the technology, for all intents and purposes, it's really suited for the technological practical applications. But you think about funding ICOs, and you take this, what's supposed to be decentralized, you take it into centralized, and then it's regulated, and so it's kind of an opposite philosophy, which makes sense to me. But I'd be interested, because I think that there will be a point where it will turn, and once there's that nice sweet spot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it matures, because if you look at a startup, and you're immersed in this in terms of them going to find seed capital, and for a lot, $500,000 is a lot of seed capital, right, to get things going. So in ICO, it's gone crazy, and you look at
10
million's not enough. And so what is realistic in this world? And if you look at the stats that are coming out of the ICO time is over because they're not reaching these very high hard caps. But if some of them have quite happily raised just in private rounds 5 to 10 million without even going public, what can a startup do with that kind of money?
And actually, going back to the news article that we were looking at, which says, despite what you hear, that ICO is not over. You and I had a chat a couple of weeks ago, and where you said actually ICO rounds are actually happening more privately. A lot of the institutional money that wasn't coming in, and I think we got the same type of validation a couple of weeks back when I had some of the guys doing blockchain. They also said the same thing. A lot of that is not on the wallets or the exchanges. They were actually done privately.
Yeah, you could got both extremes. You've got like the security exchange in the US, T0, they've raised, I think, something like 250 million privately.
Yeah.
Telegram closed out privately,
150
million.
yeah.
So you've got some extremes. And then you've got smaller ones that I'm aware of. Even recent times, they've raised very little publicly, but they've raised between 5 and 9 million in private
Have
rounds.
you heard of CryptoKitties?
Yes.
That one raised a lot of money as well.
But these are just smaller ones in the HR space, in payment space. So they're not huge public affairs, but they've raised significant money for a startup.
And also, like a lot of family office traditional money, people from that have made money in the past through their businesses have been looking at how to be part of this. Finally,
With that background, you know, the peer-to-peer lending, the family business, you know, that's all the underlying ethos and philosophy. I think that is what's really interesting, that you can apply that to this.
Yeah, it's interesting talking to the players in the family office and even the VCs. The VCs, they're still, as a generalisation, still quite nervous and cynical in watching, but they are watching because they want to participate. They're just not quite sure, most of them, how they're going to do that. So I think that's where the creativity's got to come in, and the risk mitigation from companies offering an ICO of how do you do it and encourage these funds to come in and participate.
Well, there's many layers of and we talk about the color of money, right? So where we've seen the hype of ICOs and people participating in buying these tokens the past couple of years was essentially money that was held and managed by themselves. It was earned or invested, and it was controlled within their own interest. Whereas the current wave that we are seeing people slowly coming in are not their money. It's somebody else's money. So they have a mandate to diversify that into something. They just don't know whether this entire sort of blockchain token is something that they should really be putting that entire sort of investment in. And is that an investment or a gamble, right?
Your last point there, should they be putting it in? And you're very involved in this space. What is your opinion of what you would look for if you're investing your money or recommending someone to invest their money? What are the basic principles you'd be looking at?
So the principle, if I was coming from a personal point of view and I was making an investment decision or trying to gamble, say for example, right? I would be more open to looking at different things because I know the decision and who is going to be accountable is myself. But I also manage other people's monies for many years, and I ran a family office in the past. So as a family office, it's not my money. I have to answer to somebody. And if that doesn't fall within the mandate that I have agreed with the investors, I can't just freely say, hey, let's buy the next sort of launch and let's do that. And that is essentially not only that restriction, but also to answer that question, why that's relevant to why the institutional money are coming in. Last year and beyond, there weren't so many ICOs that were relevant to healthcare or that were relevant to agriculture. There were some, but at large, there weren't many. And we've seen that come in much more larger scale. So allowed the ability to make choices a lot wider.
Yeah.
That is my opinion.
But you didn't answer the question. What would you look at? What would be 2 or 3 of the top things that you would look at if you were trying to analyze the investment?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So I'm curious because you can come from two or 3 different angles.
And I've also do it myself, right? I watch it like a hawk, and I've done that last year. And I want to look at the platform. The environment has changed. Last year, to answer that question, I didn't look at anything really. Right. I just looked at the white paper. Maybe I read the white paper. I've known people that are in this space, but at large, the early part of last year, I just wanted to buy and dump it once it's gone to the secondary market.
So you're a speculator.
I was a speculator. Okay. I was a gambler. Let's put it that way. This year is very different.
So you're part of the problem.
I was part of the problem. Yes, I admit that. Not a big problem, but a very small, at my capacity, very small problem. But this year, definitely things have changed drastically. Paying attention to what the underlying technology was. What was the purpose of that race? Understanding who are the people behind that technology. was stuff that I would definitely be reading on. And
Yeah.
and it's essentially, I know, doing a lot of layers of research. And to be very honest with you, right now I look at more platforms than I look at the actual try to get in the first one to go into buying the new ICOs. It's just, the sort of sentiment, the overall sentiment, and it's essentially what this article talks about is the fear that we've seen just so many have sort of suddenly launched and then dropped 50% or 70% in value.
That is an important point to make because, where back, last year, 2 years ago, there was less choice, less availability, less things to look at. And, I've seen it surge in the past year, and it's just like, again. And then you start to think about the credibility of what's behind it and the credibility of the technology. And, then it becomes based on opinion, based on reputation of who's
that
behind
trust.
it
Yeah.
and the trust. And then it gets into, which is, trust is, blockchain, you can trust, but because we've seen such a surge and such a flooding in the market lately.
Yeah. And
What about you? What do you look?
I think it comes back to basic principles of why you want to invest in something or support it. And do you like the people involved? Are they good actors? Actors in terms of experienced entrepreneurs, or they have the courage to go through the hurdles it's going to take to execute? Because you can have money and you can have a good idea, but if you don't have the people who have the persistence and enthusiasm to go through all the challenges we know exist in a startup environment, it's not going to happen. So I think people...
And it's actually on that, it takes a lot more to raise on the ICO space today than compared to somebody who's trying to raise on the equity space because of not only the size, but also that specifically that crowdsourcing. It's now you have to travel internationally.
And it's 24/7. Once you've engaged token sale, the stakeholders, it's not if you've done an IPO, it's quarterly reports. Now it's they're expecting reports daily or weekly as to the progress on the project, and the whole social media aspect of supporting or working with stakeholders is very intense. It's a whole new aspect to managing a business.
And in fact, they say that prior to doing ICO, like if you look at a traditional equity raise, which is you are gonna go IPO, right? You essentially will get some high flyer investment banking organization that will come in and will assess your company, blah blah blah, to go through the 30D process, and that takes months to really do. But ICO, a lot of the time is you are on your own, man. Like you do have a lot of support that is sort of sprouting out, but at large, you need to form your own Telegram group. You need to go and create a hype and that movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because you have to do that, whereas you had a mechanism and a system in place for, IPOs and all these traditional ways to raise funds. But you have to become this social media rock star in addition to being super savvy about what you're doing.
Like come on this show and talk about.
Yeah, there you go. Come on the show.
But that spawned a lot of jobs because handling the social media is now a big part of what's got to be done. So most people literally aren't capable or have the capacity to do it. So it's all outsourced primarily now.
And you can actually break it in stages and chunks, right? Because I've met people who are just purely on focusing on how to bring you across another country to meet potential investors, to talk about, and they host events and they do that. We have a couple here in Singapore. And then we've got organizations that get you opportunities to meet other collaboration.
And co-working spaces.
And open sourcing, right? Open sourcing is not just as easy as it sounds. I mean, it's easy to say, I'm just going to put my code on the World Wide Web. But at the same time, to get the developers to come in and participate, how do you incentivize them? Is your token worth anything for them to want to come in, right?
Yeah, that's a big question at the moment. It was easy before of, hey, come in on a success base, you pay you a minimum just to keep things ticking over, but the most of it will be based on the success of the ICO. And because some of the ICOs are not even getting off the ground before their ICO, it makes it a lot harder to bring talent in because they're now more cynical around what the reward's going to be.
So what is your view now on this space? Because obviously there is I wouldn't say fear, but I would say there's a lot of doubt on the legitimacy, especially there were so many frauds in the past where people have just raced through this form of instrument and they just kind of run away with the money.
Yeah, it's like any industry, though. There's always opportunity for bad actors, bad players to come in and abuse what's there. So there's that element of. So you got the scams, which ideally would be
but it's everywhere, right?
Yeah. So that's not just relevant to crypto space.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of scams in just ordinary everyday business. So there's that element. Then you've got, to me, I think what we're going to see is, as I was saying before, we're going to see equity come in early to see. We're going to see technology developed. We're going to see communities built. And then we're going to see ICOs off the back of that, which will have ICO people coming and purchasing tokens of its utility, really coming in to support the business. They like the product or service. They would use the token to do that. And the exchange appreciation of that token is a sideshow to the value of the tokens creating in a genuine business model. So if those kind of businesses mature and we see lots of good use cases, then ICOs will mature to the point where they're a genuine way of funding a startup.
Like there's a real need for it. It's like you're using cryptos as a form of like a blood inside a system that needs to flow, right? But you need to make sure that structure is secure, it's actually solid.
Yeah.
Otherwise, whatever flows in there, it could collapse anytime.
It could bleed out.
Yeah.
You're using your analogy. Yeah.
Even the genuine ones that I've worked with, the challenge they've got is that they've raised the money from an ICO. And the roadmap has about a 12-month technology build before they actually put their token to use.
Yeah.
So the frustration for those who have come in to speculate is, what's keeping the demand going on the token? What's going to build the price? So what happened was market makers come into exchanges and artificially manipulated price so the speculators could do their trades. But then you can only do so much of that, and then the token prices all went down. And then that's a timing thing as well. You have Bitcoin and Ethereum all diving, so all the altcoins follow suit.
Free fall.
So unless there's a very strong business case, and there's only a few of them out there that can support demand on the token, it's going to be a real struggle for these speculators to do well out of it.
Yeah. Michelle, have you participated in any ICOs?
I have not. I have not, but I was thinking ahead because you were talking about the networking events, and you were talking about this community. Building communities, building trust, building opportunities for people to participate, and it's becoming a lot. Gustavo, you'd mentioned it from banking. There's a lot of similarities. But see, I'm not from that world, so this is very interesting.
So you use the word participate, and I encourage everyone. It's like my children. I encourage them to participate, and what that means is it doesn't. You got to take the focus off what the value of a Bitcoin is. Everyone thinks, 6,000, who's going to do that? That's a big gamble, or 12,000 or 20,000 and all that. So it's not about that. It's about tomorrow spending the value of your lunch and going and opening a wallet. You can open the wallet for free. So you can learn how to open and close wallets and use wallets for free. Yeah. When you want to put something in, you can buy $20 of Bitcoin, put it into a wallet, exchange it, sum it for an Ethereum, or buy a piece of an altcoin. So you can go and play with very little money. Get in the game is always what I encourage people to do, because this is not going away. However it evolves and matures, it's very much like, as everyone's saying, like the
everybody's computer, right?
Yep. Email didn't go away. It took a while for people to start adopting. So the same thing's happening here with wallets and cryptocurrency. And if you can watch from the sidelines and commentate, or you can get in there and get your hands dirty a little bit.
And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of people sort of they don't know what it is, don't bother understanding what it is, and immediately rules it out as a fraud, right? As a scam. But then yet the underlying sort of understanding of what the purpose and how it kind of grew from all of that distrust and that sort of it's just very cynical, because the whole purpose of how the technology became so popular is because of the distrust that people had on individual institutions.
Exactly, different governments, different centralized banks, and
Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper specifically said it came out of the financial crisis. So it was like a phoenix rising from the ashes in 2009 of saying, here's an alternative. Do you... And
people were angry at that time for the governments, right? When in the US in particular, when the what do you call it, the AIA and what was it, Fannie Mae,
Bank,
they got funding from the government, and they essentially first people they paid were the C-level executives, and the justification was that they were going to resign, and that would be more costly had they not gotten their bonus.
They should just put them in prison.
Right, there you go. And to that, it was essentially why people was like, why can't we find a system where it's not decided by a single individual, by a single organization? And that was essentially why the
keep
blockchain
everyone in line, make everyone accountable, trust. And
it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's very much like in 2000, where we had a lot of wonderful ideas about e-commerce and particularly retail, and the prediction was bricks and mortar is going to die. However, it's 20 years later, nearly 20 years later, and bricks and mortar's still there.
In fact, we're seeing things reverse thing happening. Right? A lot of e-commerce are going into brick and mortar. Actually,
yes, you're getting again a hybrid model. The bricks and mortar players have now got an e-commerce model, and so it's just another channel for them. And then, like you say, vice versa, e-commerce players are opening bricks and mortar, because it's
like
just
Amazon buying Whole Foods.
Exactly, but so we'll probably see something similar in the cryptocurrency space, where banks will ultimately pick up the pieces they see of value in the blockchain, the cryptocurrency space, add it to their ecosystem, and the big cryptocurrency players will start acquiring banks. So we're going to...
I'll be watching for that. I think that'll be really interesting.
We're actually seeing quite a lot of banking institutions, not so much the massive big ones, but even the big ones, they have incubator systems within the organization, right? And some of them are actually solving for some form of blockchain application. Maybe not crypto, but we've seen quite a lot of them applying forms of blockchain. Yeah. And although some of them don't even want to admit that they're using blockchain, because it's a name.
Because it's associated with crypto and virtual currency and
Yeah, I spoke to, I won't name the bank, but it was one of the top private wealth banks, to the investment and IT team, about a couple hundred people last year in November, and less than 2% had even opened a wallet. But the challenge was all their clients were asking, what are they doing around this Bitcoin thing or the cryptocurrency? What's the bank's position? So you've got CEOs of some of these banks talking about it being fraud and a scam and so forth. And then you've got, in the back rooms, R&D centers set up to work out how they're going to use blockchain to improve their systems. So there's a real ambiguity going on within the banks, and you've got thousands of people in their personnel teams not really sure of the direction the banks are taking around all this.
But I think also with that, that unsure, that skepticism on how and what this sort of the crypto space is happening, it's a good thing. I mean, it's keeping us on check. I mean, as much as I love going forward, and it's just like I'm always the one in trouble, right? And I'm in the bank, I'm the worst at following regulation. I would just do whatever I want, and then
that's why blockchain was developed, though. It's to basically have that
heads
accountability.
But you need having But having somebody or something, a system that keeps you on check, is not so much about. About slowing down. Obviously, that is one of the consequences, but it does get you to see from a different angle, from taking into consideration maybe there's a better solution. Maybe there are synergies in applying the old and the new.
Well, let's look at the reality of it's commercial, right?
Yeah.
So
making money.
Anything that comes in to eat part of the bank's lunch, they're going to be a little upset and defensive
Don't
around.
doubt that.
Which is why they have that front room and the back room, like you were just saying.
Within the last, I think, week or 2 weeks, there were two major transactions, one in Ethereum, one in Bitcoin, of over 100 million, and it cost cents to make that transfer. And they were looking at what it would cost in the traditional means. It would have been, in one case, over $1 million to do the transfer.
Right.
So if you look at that and the writing on the wall on this kind of thing, the banks are like any major industry. They will start sowing a huge amount of doubt in the public's mind until they get their resources sorted out as to how they're going to protect their bottom line. So I have no doubt about, and I'm quite cynical around any big industry and the way they'll come in and put doubt in the public's mind over what's going on.
And let me, on that point, financial institutions today are so competitive.
Yep.
It's just becoming harder and harder.
Yeah.
Private banks in Asia, I mean, look at that. How many have closed down, right? They've come into Asia. They found hard to compete amongst each other. Some of the largest sale, look, Stokes, Soju DBS, right? They pull out of Singapore. You've got what was the one, the BOS bought over ING, the BOS bought over ING and another other sort of private bank. And then we had Coutts, we had RBS, all of these kind of selling to each other. They all kind of pull out one by one. Merrill Lynch during the financial crisis. And so it's extremely, extremely difficult to earn the spread from the customer and as well stay alive simply. And right now they're selling their arm. They're chopping off their arm and selling it off to local banks. DBS today owns quite a couple of the sort of institutions that pull out, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, if you don't start innovating and going forward and catching on some of the latest sort of digital trends, then it's you're going to stay behind. It's a race of who catches first.
And what's happened this year is you're looking at some of the major funds around the world wanting to participate, or actually are participating, and they're doing a lot of off-exchange purchases that are in the hundreds of millions. They've got billion-dollar type funds. They're now allocating it to the cryptocurrencies, looking at the major ones, and particularly Bitcoin, and taking a position, particularly in this down market.
Why Bitcoin? Do you think
Good
it's because
question.
it's the most liquid, it's the first one in the market?
Because everybody has heard of it.
Here is my opinion, and take it for what it's worth, 2 cents. I did the analogy last year when I was looking at it as to what's similar. If you look at .com, its relationship to domain names, TLDs. .com started, there was a package of about 5 of them. You get .org, .net, etc. Then now we're looking at around 1,900, I think, TLDs in the domain name space. .com still have around 40. It fluctuates between 39 and about 43% of the market of the volume of domain names. They probably have about 90% of the value, because there is a perception that if you're anything, if you're worth anything in the business, you go after a .com, and you will spend ridiculous amount of money to get a particular name when you could spend quite easily $10 or $40 buying the same
or
buying
AI
exactly.
or MI. Yeah.
So if you think of that, what's the rationale there? It's all perception, and Bitcoin, I believe, will be something similar. But there's no reason why another coin can't be created that is more feature-rich and functions just similar. However, Bitcoin's already got the mind space.
Right.
If you're going to go in and have a level of comfort, what are you going to put it into at the moment?
Yeah.
Bitcoin stands the test of time, 9 years.
But also like the most liquid one, because
Most
it's
liquid?
most cap, largest cap, right?
Absolutely. So it's self-perpetuating. And the other thing is, what other coin or currency does not have a figurehead? This figurehead is some anonymous person or person.
Yeah, like Ethereum has Vitalik,
Yep.
and then you've got like, all of the ones where the founders are behind it, right?
Yeah, and they create all sorts of
Bitcoin-
focus and drama, etc. Whereas this is a white paper written by one or
with
more
a Japanese name.
people who no one really knows who they are.
Yeah, I always wonder about that. And there were a funny thing is that I've seen a couple of clips on YouTube where there are people that claim to be Satoshi.
Well, of
Yeah. Have you
course.
seen
I
those?
mean, I was in this course that, part of my China MBA program, and the module at the time was blockchain in China. And, it took it down from that very basic level, like, who is he? Is it really a he? And I just thought that was one of my first introductions to learning about blockchain. And I was like, what? Why is it a mystery? Now I understand.
Hopefully it stays that way because I think that will add to the value of Bitcoin of not having someone that
Yes.
is
He's
trying to direct it in a certain way.
Well, it's sort of like a book when the author dies, like it suddenly surges in value.
The mystery is really exciting, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's smart to remain anonymous when you're breaking down one of the biggest industries in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. And to that point, I think that is the thing that maybe the ICO space could in the future practice. I don't know. Do you think that could be one potential direction that so that the ICO founders now, although they want to take credibility for creating this new next futuristic technology, but can they detach themselves from personal fame and personal?
That's a good question.
Okay, I think so. What I think is that when it comes to this, you want to have somebody to believe in. So
Yes.
Bitcoin, you have this mystery. It's exciting.
Like God.
Yeah. But when you have your ICO, when you have the technology, you kind of want to believe in the the figureheads and the leaders, and you want to brand them, and you want to really have that belief.
Well, it's a pretty consistent story. If you look at all the significant tech I'll use tech as an industry. There is some character who has a personality that people buy into, whether it's a Jobs or a Gates or a Allison, etc. It's hard to get away from that in business. That comes back to people. Do I believe in this person? Can they? And do the job?
We are both founder. I mean, we've founded businesses as well, right? And we've gotten investors to invest in us.
Yes.
And in the startup world, where people say, investors invest in people, in the case of Bitcoin, that wasn't really the case. And if obviously Bitcoin is a very different.
Maybe it is the case. It's just that it's done through the white paper. There's still a personality there, and it's strong enough to come through that document. Yeah. And people have put the white paper there saying, yes, we love this. Whoever wrote it is a genius, and
but what I mean is that that paper was essentially the pitch deck, right? If we say it's the pitch deck. But in the startup world, people don't invest based on the pitch deck. They invest based on your credentials, your qualifications. They want to have coffee with you. And we were having a chat about this, right? We were talking about how a startup during a fundraise, it's like a matching system where it's like dating. The only difference is that you don't swipe left and right, but you do want to take them out for a coffee, a dinner perhaps. And then
what happens if you go left?
How do you split the bill, right? But that was essentially what it is, and you want to get to know that. In fact, you guys, you Ross, you organize and been part of a lot of those kind of events where you get the founders of ICO companies, but also just equity raise companies, and get them to be investors, right?
Yeah, my son Harry and his and Eric from Jetcoin, I think, created a really cool way of doing it, because when I do business, I like to do it over a lunch or a meal or a coffee and get to know the people.
No deals happen over a meeting. Yeah,
exactly. When I go to these pitch fests, I get turned off. Occasionally you get a really interesting one, but it's not really what tweaks my interest, because I'm not connecting with the people per se. So these ones were done over a Sunday brunch. You didn't have anyone standing at the front of the room telling you slide by slide what they're trying to do. You got to talk to them over a nice meal, over a casual meal, and
casual with champagne.
Sounds really
foie
nice.
gras, at the Fullerton.
I've got to look into these.
Super casual.
Yeah. So Eric and Harry and team did an amazing job setting that up, and they've run a few others like that. So hopefully there's more, and hopefully I still get invited along with you, and we'll send out an invite to you as well.
Yeah. You'll be my date, Michelle.
All right, I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, because usually I go to these events by myself, and it's like
I don't have to talk. I can just eat, right?
Yeah, just
eat and drink.
Actually, this was real fun, because it was this particular one was 12 to 3. The first people I think left at 5 o'clock. There were still guys going at about 11. So it really flowed on for the whole day. Wow. It was really cool.
Must be the champagne.
Yeah.
There is something nice to that, though, because you were talking about, like pitch fests, and they're so, there is a certain energy and there's a certain excitement about going and doing that. But it's a lot like speed dating versus dating, you know, and being in a room, you know, and meeting like-minded people. So, you know, I mean, it's like, yeah, there's pitch fests are great, you know, but they're quick and they're, you know. It's like,
I judged a fun one recently. I was a little skeptical. I got an invite the day before. Can you come and help judge on this? And it was at Marina Bay Sands. They said it's in the, I can't remember, the Italian restaurant on the top floor. The name escapes me. But I turned up there and I thought, oh, how's this going to work? Everyone's milling around. And then suddenly, okay, we formed tables, the judge on each table. They had 10 ICOs, and they said, go, 5 minutes per table. And there was wine and food at each table.
okay, that's nice.
They speed dating.
And it was speed dating. And it actually turned out to be real fun because it was just move. And then we all finished, the winners and the judges all hopped in a couple of limousines and toured around Singapore for an hour. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And we got to know each other, and it was really good.
I think you guys should apply that for improving the birth rate of Singapore. Because I think that we need more of that. Like, we need more of like matching people and getting people to go out and reproduce.
There you go,
But
government.
I like your discussion before when we were talking about the importance of relationship and how you can improve the guesswork in that. It's like going to a pub and trying to find your love of your life, right? It's a real hit and miss scenario.
And there's a lot of similarities to that. There's the reason why, I mean, we try to apply a lot of sort of comedy when we, you know, doing the advisory with the startups, but at the same time, there's a huge element of truth there, that you don't just meet the first person and just marry them, right? You wanna, you also wanna know, you know, is this going to be a one-night stand, or is it going to be a second date, or are we gonna get married somewhere like 3 months later? Am I bringing somebody with 3 kids, or am I bringing somebody with like no liability whatsoever? What am I looking for? Am I looking for like monogamy or polygamy, right?
I'm Libra. I'm Libra. And you're Cancer. Is that gonna match?
Yeah. We are all pattern matching. That was the point. Like, we are all pattern matching in our head, and essentially that is what people are doing when they're looking at different types of races.
Yeah, and it's if you look at the breakdown of startups in particular and businesses in general, but startups is it on steroids. It comes down to personalities, and most of it is the unfolding around hurdles around money and all sorts of other and personality clashes, and suddenly it all just unravels. And doesn't matter how good the idea is, how much money is there, the whole thing turns to custard.
So now that so at the end of this, so we were talking about our ICO is dead. I mean, it sounds like, you know, we've had this great, awesome discussion about it. I mean, what would you see would be like the next year and a half, 2 years?
I think governments will genuinely look at how they can foster the infrastructure to support an ICO type of environment so everyone's protected, because governments, to be honest, are trying to protect their citizens from being taken advantage of. So hopefully it's not too onerous, and ICOs still can flourish at a very cost-effective way, and it doesn't become too onerous on startups to be able to have huge budgets to even do an ICO, because that would be counterproductive. So I think hopefully we can, the cynicism will die a bit, some good plays will come in, some good use cases. I think that's critical, getting genuine use cases where we're seeing tokens being used as they say they were going to be used, and give a bit more positive feedback.
Reinstate that trust back and that legitimacy. It's like kind of like the dot-com period when the bubble, right? When it burst, and then only the ones that are really.
How long did it take for seed capital and VCs start to step back into the internet dot-com developments? It probably took 12, 18 months or so before it started working away again.
Absolutely. This has been a fantastic discussion. Like, I could actually go the whole day just talking about this, you know.
I've learned so much. At the beginning of today, I was like, you know, I'm going to listen. I mean, I've learned a lot, mostly that I have to get invited to these brunches, but no.
I'll make sure your name is on the VIP list.
There you go.
Not only would you get invited, but you also be sitting right at the center table. It's like the wedding. Have you been to those Chinese weddings where you get like the center table where all the family members are in there? So I'm afraid today this is all the time that we have. It's been a really good and a pleasure having you on the show,
very
Ross.
much. Really loved it. I love the discussion. I any opportunity, I love talking about this because I think it's so important. I have 4 children, and this is part of their future, and getting this right in terms of how it evolves, like internet was for the next generation of businesses. I believe blockchain and cryptocurrency is the fuel to generate the next range of businesses and opportunities.
And you're actually walking the talk and, being sort of the front role model for your children and encouraging them to come over. I know, one of your kids, and he's definitely on this path.
Yep.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And this is Blockchain Asia. I'm Gustavo with Michelle Wonderland and
Michelle.
Rose Stokes. Thank
Thanks,
you very
guys.
much for listening.
Thank you.